Was Julius Caesar truly invincible? Imagine leading an army across unknown lands, facing enemies 10 times your number, all while trying to hold together a fragile political empire back home. That was the daily reality for Julius Caesar. History often paints him as a god among men, brilliant, fearless, and destined for greatness. But was it really that simple? Could one man, no matter how clever or charismatic, control legions, outmaneuver senators, and conquer entire nations without paying a heavy price? What if I told you that every victory came at a cost? Blood, betrayal, and unbearable pressure. So here's the question. Why was it not easy to be Caesar? Caesar did not rise to power through luck. He rose through war. Specifically, the brutal and years-long campaign in Gaul, a land filled with fierce tribes, dense forests, and bitter winters. At the height of his career, Caesar commanded 10 legions, around 50,000 soldiers, each trained, disciplined, and loyal to him personally. These were not just warriors, they were part of a well-oiled machine. Roman engineers built bridges in hours, fortifications overnight. Their tactics, tight formations, precise maneuvers, made them nearly unstoppable on open ground. But this machine had limits. Rome's strength lay in its organization, but also in its supply lines, which could stretch for hundreds of miles. One broken link meant starvation, disease, or mutiny. And when Caesar crossed into Gaul, he faced an enemy unlike any before. Not a single nation, but 50 different tribes, each with their own leaders, gods, and reasons to hate Rome. One of these tribes, the Belgae, alone fielded 100,000 warriors. The Nervi, known as the fiercest of the Gauls, ambushed Caesar's forces near the Sabis River, nearly wiping out 2 full legions. These were not minor skirmishes. They were battles where survival depended on split-second decisions, and Caesar made many. The Gauls were not primitive savages, as Roman propaganda claimed. They were skilled fighters, masters of ambush, swift horsemen, and proud warriors who defended their homeland with unmatched fury. Unlike the Romans, they didn't fight for empire or coin. They fought for freedom, and that made them dangerous. Their weapons were crude compared to Rome's gladi and pilum, but they knew how to use terrain. Forests, swamps, and mountains became their allies. They struck fast and disappeared, striking fear into even the most hardened legionnaires. In battle, the Gauls often outnumbered the Romans by 3 to 1, sometimes more. At Alesia, perhaps Caesar's greatest triumph, he faced over 100,000 Gallic warriors, including a relief force of 60,000 more. Yet Caesar did not just rely on steel. He used diplomacy, turning tribe against tribe, promising peace to those who surrendered and destruction to those who resisted. Still, every alliance was temporary, every truce fragile. Victory in Gaul brought Caesar glory and danger. He spent 8 years in the region, fighting over 50 major battles, laying siege to more than 100 towns and killing or enslaving an estimated 1 million people. Yes, 1 million. Whether we believe that exact number or not, the scale of death and destruction was staggering. But what did Caesar gain? Wealth beyond imagination, yes. Fame, certainly. But also envy. In Rome, senators watched with growing unease as Caesar grew more powerful than the state itself. His legions swore loyalty to him, not to the Senate. That made him a threat. And so, the same sword that carved an empire began to point toward civil war. Because being Caesar meant never sleeping soundly, always knowing someone wanted your head. So why was it not easy to be Caesar? Because to build an empire, he had to destroy everything in his path, and then guard it from those who wanted to tear it down. Because every decision mattered. One wrong move, and an entire legion could perish. Because leadership meant sacrifice, not just of enemies, but of friends, time, sleep, and peace. And because in the end, no matter how many battles he won, no man can escape betrayal. Julius Caesar crossed rivers, defeated armies, and changed history, but he could not change human nature. That is why it was not easy to be Caesar. Caesar did not just lead armies. he led people. And leadership is not about issuing orders. It is about making decisions no one else wants to make. He had to choose when to fight and when to negotiate, when to show mercy and when to destroy. Every choice shaped the fate of thousands: soldiers, civilians, prisoners. But as his power grew, so did the loneliness. In Rome, senators whispered behind closed doors. Generals who once followed him began to question his ambitions. Even his closest allies wondered, was Caesar still serving Rome, or building a throne for himself? The burden of command weighed heavily on him. He was expected to be perfect, always decisive, always calm, always victorious. One moment of weakness could cost everything. And in a world where loyalty was bought with gold and promises, true trust became a rare luxury. So yes, Caesar wore the laurel wreath, but beneath it, there was no peace. Caesar's ambition was both his greatest weapon and his deepest wound. He dreamed not only of conquest, but of reform, of rebuilding Rome from the ground up. He wanted to end corruption, redistribute land, grant citizenship to foreigners, and bring order to a chaotic republic. But these ideas threatened the very man who held power in Rome: the aristocrats, the senators, the elite. To them, Caesar was not a savior, he was a tyrant. His rise meant their fall. So while he marched through Gaul, crossed the Rubicon, and defeated Pompey, all in the name of justice, many saw it as a grab for control. And when he declared himself dictator for life, the final line was crossed. Because in Rome, power was supposed to be shared. And when one man took too much, someone always tried to take it back. On the 15th day of March in the year 44 before Christ, Julius Caesar walked into the Senate chamber, unaware that death waited inside. He had been warned. A seer had told him, "Beware the Ides of March." But Caesar was not a man who feared omens. He trusted his instincts, and perhaps his fatal flaw was believing that man would honor him as he honored Rome. He entered the chamber surrounded by senators, man he had spared, promoted, even forgiven. Then the daggers came out. More than 60 conspirators led by Brutus and Cassius surrounded him. One blow after another. Blood stained the floor. The man who had conquered half the known world fell, not in battle, not on a foreign field, but among those he called friends. It was not just an assassination. It was a message. No man stands above Rome. Even in death, Caesar's shadow stretched across time. His murder did not restore the Republic. It gave birth to an empire. His heir, Octavian, later Augustus, rose from the ashes of civil war and became the first emperor of Rome. The system Caesar dreamed of, centralized power, strong leadership, sweeping reforms, was finally realized, but not by him. He died before seeing his vision fulfilled. History remembers him not just as a conqueror, but as a symbol of greatness and tragedy, of how far one man can go, and how high he can rise before the fall. Because being Caesar meant carrying the weight of an empire on your shoulders every day. It meant facing enemies abroad and betrayal at home. It meant winning battle after battle, yet never feeling safe. It meant dreaming of a better Rome while watching the world turn against you. Julius Caesar was a genius, a general, a statesman, and a writer. But above all, he was human. And for all his strength, courage, and brilliance, even a god among men could bleed. That is why it was not easy to be Caesar.